Okay, well, thank you for your interest and attendance. This conference is news conference is held or sponsored by Citizens Inquiry Canada, which is a federally chartered not-for-profit company set up to promote a national independent citizen-led inquiry into Canada's response to COVID-19. We operate a website, nationalcitizensinquiry.ca, which people can go to indicate their desire to have such an inquiry. And the purpose this morning is to say that that website is now fully equipped to receive suggestions from Canadians as to who should be the commissioners to conduct this inquiry, an inquiry into what went right, what went wrong, and most importantly, what lessons can be learned from the COVID-19 experience that would better equip the country to handle national crises in the future. If people want to make these suggestions, and we're appealing to them to do so, they can go to that website, nationalcitizensinquiry.ca, and click on Call for Commissioners. And then they can make their suggestions there and provide additional information as requested. People will ask, what's the task of these commissioners once they're determined? And the principal task will be to organize public hearings, 2 to 3 day public hearings across the country in 9 centers, likely in February and March of next year. And these will be both in person, and there'll be opportunity for virtual participation as well. They will be held in Moncton for Atlantic Canada, Montreal for Quebec, Toronto for Ontario, Winnipeg for Manitoba, Saskatoon for Saskatchewan, Red Deer for Alberta, Victoria for British Columbia, with an opportunity for virtual participation from the 3 territories, and then concluding with a summary hearing in Ottawa, after which the commissioners will be expected to produce a report. The other thing these commissioners will be tasked with is to do everything they can to ensure that these hearings are as impartial and transparent and credible as possible. And the hope is that they will not only hear stories from Canadians as to the impacts of the various COVID protection measures on them. They'll hear alternative medical and scientific narratives, but the hope is that they will, at the end, come up with recommendations. We'll ask people for recommendations as what can be in handling future national crisis, what can be learned from this one that would make the future handling of national crisis as effective and as responsible as possible. So that's basically the purpose this morning, is to announce the website is now fully prepared to receive suggestions for commissioners. We're inviting people to go to that nationalcitizensinquiry.ca and click on Call for Commissioners and give us your suggestions. So that's enough from me, but I'm open to answering questions about either this announcement or the various other aspects of the process.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. So we'll just ask people to please raise their hands if they have a question and remain muted unless you're speaking. And in French.
Would you like me to just provide a quick translation summary of what Preston just said?
I think the French translation of the written announcement should be enough, unless someone does want, I guess I elaborated a little more than what was in the press release. Someone requests that, that'd be fine.
Sure. Well, maybe we'll just move to questions then, unless somebody wants a summary en français. Are there any questions for Mr. Manning?
I have had an inquiry about the to what extent, if people visited this website and asked for or indicated their support for an inquiry. And it has been quite encouraging. This has only been up for a short while, but there's been over 34,000 people indicated, yes, we want an inquiry of this kind. One somewhat disturbing aspect, we asked people, is it okay do you want your name to be identified with this petition, or would you prefer your name to be kept confidential? And 44% said they would prefer to keep their name confidential, which indicates that there's a bit of fear that if they were identified with calling for an inquiry, they might be subject to harassment on social media or even repercussions from the government. And therefore, one of the things this inquiry will try to do is to remove the fear factor from the discussion of the COVID-19 phenomena and the government's responses to it. In a democracy, when people are afraid to tell their stories or to provide alternative views, that's not a good thing. And hopefully this inquiry can remove the fear factor. One of the other questions here, because people send me these things as well, is to comment on, there are other people starting to call for a national inquiry. I think a week or so ago, the NDP critic in the health critic in the House of Commons, the NDP called for a national inquiry. There's a Liberal backbencher who has a private member bill calling for a national inquiry. The Dr. Tam herself a month ago indicated that her agency would welcome questions as to how this was handled. And one of the signs that an idea or a concept is ripe for implementation is when different people with different perspectives come to a similar conclusion that this sort of thing should happen. So that is encouraging. Well, one of the challenges, of course, that people that call for a government-sponsored inquiry, the challenge there is the skepticism of the public that if an inquiry is commissioned by the government under the Public Inquiries Act, either federal or provincial, you have the government investigating itself, which generates skepticism. And we offer this alternative of a citizen-led inquiry that hopefully it doesn't suffer from that particular skepticism. But are there other questions?
Please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. We have a number of news outlets on the line with us this morning. No questions for Mr. Manning?
The people are sending me these by email. Another one here is people asking about the relevance of the Emergency Act hearings, which are going on, of course, in Ottawa at the current time. And how does what we are talking about differ from the Emergency Act hearing? And there's three major differences. One is, as I've mentioned already, that this national inquiry we are talking about would be citizen-led. It would not be directed by the governments, which is a fundamental difference between it and the Emergency Act inquiry. Secondly, its scope of inquiry is much broader than the Emergency Act inquiry, is dealing mainly with the invoking of the Emergency Act in response to the Freedom Convoy. This National Citizens Inquiry will cover everything from the mandates for face masking to the mandates for social distancing to the mandates for school lockdowns and economic lockdowns, and provide an opportunity for alternative scientific and medical narratives on all those subjects. So its range of inquiry would be much broader than that of the emergency inquiry. And then thirdly, of equal importance, the National Citizens Inquiry will provide an opportunity for people to comment on not just on the actions and responses of the federal government, but also on the actions and responses of the provincial governments and the municipal governments. So there's quite a difference between this national citizen-led inquiry and the current Emergency Act inquiry in Ottawa. Okay, any other questions? I have one more here, but I don't want to monopolize the question period.
I don't see any other hands raised yet.
Okay, the last one pertains to how can you ensure that this citizen-led inquiry will be objective and impartial and not slanted one way or another, which is a very good question, because the credibility of this whole exercise will depend on about three things: the number of people that want it, the credibility of these commissioners, the credibility of the people who testify and witness at it, but the extent to which it is seen as objective and impartial is absolutely critical. And one way to ensure this, and I know I sound like a broken record, is if one has suspicions that this won't be impartial or won't be objective, then think of somebody who could be a commissioner that would have those characteristics. Who would you think might be objective and impartial? We've got different feedback on this. Some people say, well, you're looking at a retired judge or a retired ombudsman or a retired regulatory official or someone like that. Others are saying, well, yes, but you also are going to need people with credentials for dealing with medical evidence, legal evidence, economic evidence. But the crucial thing is that these commissioners be seen to be objective and impartial. And you can contribute to that by thinking of someone who has those characteristics, going to nationalcitizensinquiry.ca, clicking on the call for commissioners and putting that person's name into the mill. So that's the story for today. If there's not any other questions, going once, going twice, going three times. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. If you do have additional questions, you can send them to press@nationalcitizensinquiry.ca. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.